This is the B-17 Flying Fortress, a bomber used in many raids over the course of World War II. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into all of its instruments and hidden secrets, as well as its simple yet effective design. I'm Max Hayes, and this is Blue Paw Print. The B-17 measured just over 74 feet and 9 inches in length and stood 19 feet 1 inches tall when on the ground. It had a wingspan of 103 feet and 9 inches, or 31.6 meters. The outer layer of the wing was made out of thin alloy panels. Although not providing much protection, it did help keep the shape of the wing. The underneath part of the wing is what really made it strong. It was made out of a series of trusses, forged together to make a very compact and sturdy wing. It was aligned with another metal alloy before the panels were put on top. The B-17 had multiple control surfaces in order to make turning easier. Even if one of these surfaces were damaged, they could still use the other to turn and maneuver the aircraft. Carrying no payload, the B-17 still weighed 34,000 pounds. With a payload, that could shoot all the way up to 64,000. And in some rare scenarios, all the way to 72,000 pounds on takeoff. The front compartment of the B-17 is home to the bombardier and navigator. They could have up to 4 50 cal machine guns at the ready to defend the aircraft. The next section back was home to the pilots and engineer, who could man the top ball turret. The top ball turret was equipped with 2 30 cal machine guns. The next section is the bomb bay, where the payload itself is carried. In the center of the aircraft sits the radio operator, as well as the ball gun turret. The radio operator can man a 30 cal machine gun out of the top of the aircraft. The ball turret also is armed with 2 30 cals in order to protect the bottom of the B-17 from any intruders. The next section is home to the waist gunners. In this version of the B-17, they are placed adjacent to each other, but in later versions, this would be fixed, as gunners continued to run into each other while trying to scan for their targets. The last section held the tail gunner and the landing gears. The tail gunner was armed with 2 50 caliber machine guns to protect the back of the aircraft. The tail was made in a similar way to the wings, constructed using trusses. The B-17 was meant to fly into formation, using multiple firing angles to protect the aircraft. Flying in formation worked quite well for the B-17s when they were first deployed, but the Luftwaffe did not take too long to adapt, using massive fighter squadrons of Bf-109s to intercept the bombers at high altitudes. Because of this, all gunners had to be alert, scanning the skies. As the navigators were plotting their course. As Winston Brown said, it was the calm before the storm as you were flying to your target. The real danger was on the return flight and near your target, where the Luftwaffe and anti-aircraft fire from AA guns would be the most highly concentrated. After the bombs were dropped, the aviators would man their posts, expecting Bf-109s to dive in on them. They would keep their eyes peeled for any signs of silhouettes of fighters in the clouds or on the horizon. The B-17 had multiple armored sections in order to help protect the crew from flak. It did a pretty good job at this. However, direct shots from MG and cannon rounds from Bf-109 and other similar fighters proved not the best at stopping them, as oftentimes the bullets would rip straight through the armor. Despite this, though, it was incredibly vital to have this in the flak-riddled sky. Despite this protection and armor, flak still proved a deadly adversary, especially while flying close into formation. The payload on the B-17 was, well, its whole purpose, to drop bombs. It could carry around 9,600 pounds of bombs in its bomb bay. But going on a full load greatly hindered its range from its British bases, in which almost every single B-17 flew out of in the European theater. Their range could be greatly increased to around 1,300 to 1,400 miles by simply reducing the amount in their bomb bay. When preparing to drop the ordnance, the pilot would set it to autopilot and give control to the bombardier, who would select its payload, open the bomb bay doors, and drop the payload. At which point he would say, "Bombs away." The bombardier's job was not easy, however, but it was made slightly better with the help of the Norton bomb sight, which calculated the height, speed, and altitude of the aircraft in order to make the drop precise. After dropping the payload, the bombardier would give control back to the pilot, who would turn back for the British base. The B-17's guns vectored almost every angle of fire. Especially while flying in formation, there wasn't really an angle that was unprotected. The German Luftwaffe quickly figured that out after hundreds of their fighters were gunned out of the sky by B-17s. They found the best approach was to approach head-on, as not only would this close the rate of distance a lot faster, but it was also tended to be this B-17's least defended side. And keep in mind, these flights of enemy fighters were absolutely massive, sometimes holding up to 50 to 60 enemy fighters attacking a B-17 formation at once. The B-17s did their best to vector the fire as the gunners unloaded on the enemy fighters. The gunners on the B-17 would call out enemy fighters using a clock system, with 12 o'clock being dead ahead and 6 o'clock being directly behind the aircraft. The B-17 engines were piston-powered, similar to the P-51 Mustang and other planes of its time. All the engines had a small fuel line that connected it to the fuel tanks located on the wings. The B-17's 4 engines could produce 1,200 horsepower each. This was a remarkable feat at its time. The fuel tanks were mounted in the wings and close to the fuselage. This is what supplied the engines with their precious fuel that they needed to fly. Power could be shut off to the oil line if it's struck by a bullet to prevent flames from erupting from that engine, which was often done to mitigate fires. Furthermore, every single fuel tank had a thin layer of plasma on the inside of it, which allowed for bullets to strike it and still prevent any leaks by resealing itself after the bullet had entered. And as long as it did not set ablaze, the oil and fuel would be secured and not leak out of the aircraft. And that is it. The engineering behind the B-17 bomber that proved a crucial part in the Allies' success in the European theater.